Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and welcome back to another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's #1 conservative podcast. We are back here in Studio 130 on a chilly winter day with Sarah Curry. Greetings.
Good to be here. Yeah.
Welcome. Good. Well, we are always fortunate to have you here in the office because you don't work here every day, but you're here today. So we grab you and pull you on the podcast. So if nothing else productive happens today, you can at least say you were on the podcast, right?
That's right.
Okay, good. So, look, the folks get a little used to John and I going on and on about all number of things that may or may not have anything to do with this organization's mission. But you, on the other hand, seem to get right to the heart of the matter on many of the things that we're working on. And you have really done a lot of good work lately on local government issues. Would that be a fair?
It is near and dear to my heart, which is why I don't live in the booming metropolis of Des Moines. I choose to live in small town Iowa.
Look, without being too critical of Central Iowa, getting out of Central Iowa probably does help one's perspective on how the world ought to work.
And for me, it's the other way around. When I come into the big city, I'm like, oh, this is how the other half lives. Okay, that's right. There's traffic here.
The rest of the world doesn't operate the same way that Southwest Iowa does. No, alternatively, does the rest of the world work the way that it does here in the west suburbs of Des Moines? But
yes, but okay. I can see in Waukee, you don't get stuck behind a tractor and a combine on your way to preschool in the morning.
You know what? That's just freedom right there. No, it is. It's wonderful. You should never... Despite the fact that it might take a while to get there, you should never feel bad about that. Okay, so sometimes these, and I think there's several different things I want to get at today with you that you've been working on, and I want to hopefully there's a theme that kind of runs through all of this, is that sometimes these things can seem technical or a little bit in the weeds, but yet they're very, very real on their impact to individuals and businesses in Iowa. And it's why we spend time on them, right?
Yeah. I mean, I dig into stuff and all the time. My husband, he's like, what are you doing? You're reading this long, involved thing. And then when I summarize it for him in 2 sentences, he's like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, we got to do something about that. So
the first one that I want to, this has been out there for a while, and I think we've maybe even sort of talked about it a little bit, but we're really starting to dig into, I take that back. You're really starting to dig into it more. But this idea of universal basic income, which is not a brand new idea.
Right.
Now, if you remember right, I think it was it Andrew Yang that really
his presidential campaign
popularized that back in the 2020 Democrat presidential primary. But at a basic level, what is universal, or the idea of universal basic income?
It's the government kind of gives you a check every month to kind of help you. It's like the government giving you a paycheck. I mean, there's lots of things you can think about that after I say it, but that's ultimately what it is. And the intended purpose is to help low income or those struggling or those having problems. But at the end of the day, it's the government giving private citizens a check similar to the stimulus we all got after COVID. Kinda, for a different reason, though.
Is the idea supposed to be that takes the place of existing entitlements, or is it supposed to be a sweetener on top of? So I've got my Medicaid, I've got my, SNAP benefits, and then on top of that, I get.
I think that was the point, because there's this income trap. So if you're getting daycare assistance, if you're getting Medicaid, if you're getting food care assistance, and then you go to work and you get pay raise, and it might only be a small pay raise, you lose all of these government benefits.
Which actually happens. I mean,
that's a true story. Real. Like, there's a problem, right? And so you might say, well, I don't want a $5,000 raise because then I lose all these benefits and actually cost me more. So I think I haven't done a ton of background and historical research on this concept, but I think that's where it ultimately comes from. It's like, let's let the government help these people to try to help bring them out of poverty, give them a little bit extra money without having them suffer by losing some of these benefits that they need, like childcare and that kind of thing.
Okay. That's as charitable as I want to be, so let's shift gears. At the end of the day, it is just a straight check, just a transfer of money. Here's some cash. Go do whatever you think you need to do with it, right? Okay. So why we're looking at this now is this is being done. And I think many Iowans probably don't know about that. But
it's being done right here in Iowa.
Done right here
by our local governments.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's not a national thing like what Andrew Yang was talking about. We're talking about the city of Des Moines, city of Windsor Heights. They are actually sending people in their communities checks to support this concept. And it's like,
so we've written about this a little bit. There are 4 governmental entities here in central Iowa: Polk County, the city of Des Moines, the city of Urbandale, and the city of Windsor Heights, to all in to the tune of $865,000 that they have put into this pot for this, I guess, a pilot program to just hand out cash, right?
Yeah. So, and those are the communities that I personally went to and asked for their information on this. There are other communities in the, Des Moines metro area that are participating in this. Just those are the big ones that are contributing the most amount of money. I think it was around $1.5 million in total.
Okay.
And so these communities don't know who's getting the money. It's a blind pilot program, and they're partnering with a university and a nonprofit to create this pilot program. So these people were identified in the communities, and they're going to be receiving a couple $100 every month for 2 years.
Well, look, apart from just whether or not it's a good idea or not, just to give taxpayer money out for free to people, how do you pick? I like who gets it and who doesn't. I suppose there's some kind of criteria, but that still seems a little.
And that wasn't clear. When I did the records request, they're like, oh, you have to contact this person because it's a blind program and we don't oversee that part and we don't really know. But I do think it's odd, right? If you live in one of these cities and money from that city is going out to people you have no idea about, you know, they actually need it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have really good spending practices. Maybe they are a single mom that needs a little help. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, I live in one of these communities that's handing this money out. So
how does that make you feel, Chris?
I pay my taxes to make my community, to provide the essential services that I benefit from in my community. And I know that I pay a lot in property taxes, and I don't want that money just being handed out to other people, because it's whatever you want to call it, however you want to dress it up, that is straight up wealth redistribution. There is no other way to define that, or it's just taking money from one person, giving it to another.
No, you're exactly right. And I'm not saying there's not need in our communities. There definitely is. But the government is not the place to do that. That's why we have nonprofit organizations. Right. That's why we have churches. That's why we have charitable giving, so that we can help people in need or people that just need a little step up when times are down. But that's not the role of government. It's not to take from one and give to another. And so I don't like the precedent. It is a pilot program. Well, I hope it's not successful, because I don't want to see it continuing.
Well, and that's also the problem, and it's just the way these things work. They start with a pilot program, but does anyone think they're going to run a pilot program and come back and say, this just didn't work? They're already bought in. They're going to be looking for an excuse and a reason to keep going.
We always call it seed money. You plant that seed and then it grows and grows, and that's what this is. These pilot programs, it's what the federal government does. The federal government says, here's a little bit of money, start this program, and then it started, and you can't get rid of it, and it just keeps going and going and going and going.
Right. Well, good. So we're going to keep tracking that, keep watching this one. I think it'll be interesting. I would not be surprised to see a legislative response to this year. This does not seem like the kind of thing that the legislature has looked favorably upon in recent years. So
and for any of our listeners out there, if you're wanting a little bit more information on it, we do have an article on our website.
Yep. Always. Good. So briefly, speaking of Central Iowa and big ticket government programs, DART. I don't know. Did you see this? Where I think we talked about it briefly. The DART is the Central Iowa bus service, and we talked. John and I did about how the city of Grimes was pulling out of that altogether and not sending their contribution. Well, DART's got some financial problems, and they're having trouble making ends meet. And so their solution, should not surprise anyone, is to go to the city of Des Moines, go to local government, want more taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. And we're just starting, and I know you're going to look at this some more, Sarah, but why is the answer always to go to the taxpayer for more money? Why can't the answer be to right size your business plan?
You know, it's a problem we see in government across all levels, right? Federal, state, local. And everyone wants metrics. And the problem is the easy metric is, oh, we put this much money. And I'm going to open a can of worms here, but everyone says education, right? Like, oh, just put more money in education and it'll get better. It's like, no, like, why don't we see how long does it take for a student to go to Iowa State and get out in 4 years? You know, what are those 4th grade reading scores? What about, like, let's look at actual measurables. So when it comes to government programs, including DART, there need to be definitive objective measurables. We had X amount of riders. We went this many miles. We, you know, whatever those measurables are, but their measurable doesn't need to be we spent $20 million or whatever that number is. It needs to be an actual measure. And then, you know, this is radical. So why doesn't the government try to be more efficient with its money? I mean, I know you hear it all the time, right? Like, run government like a business, and it can't exactly run like a business. But in this sense, it kind of can, because if you don't have any riders on a certain line or a certain, you know, area of the city, cut that out. Like, focus where the riders are needed. You know, get your cost and your return on investment on all. Like, it is a mathematical problem, not a taxpayer problem.
Well, in the city of Grimes, and we gave them credit for this, they looked at that. Do you remember how many riders they had in the city of Grimes?
You told me it was
13.
Yeah.
13. So, yes, they like, you know what? We're not getting value out of this. We're out. Great.
And that's a smart decision to make.
And I think the other thing too, and we talk about going to the taxpayer, and sometimes I worry that just sounds like a talking point. But that's exactly what DART's doing here. They're not just going to the city of Des Moines and saying, hey, you've got this giant budget. Can you carve out some dollars and give it to us? They're going straight over onto the franchise fee and asking the city of Des Moines to extract more money from their residents just to send straight over the bus service. They're bypassing the whole idea of setting priorities within the budget and just going and saying, give us more money.
And this is something, you know, I don't live in the city of Des Moines, but I would just guess that there is not a huge group of people at the city council meetings demanding for more bus service. I'm just going to guess.
Well, they actually have gotten a few, which is my understanding is like DART's giving out free bus passes for them to get to the city council meeting too. But,
so there's that.
Yeah, but it's like, really?
Is that the biggest issue facing the city of Des Moines right now?
No, and I will give credit. It feels, I know there's an article in Axios Des Moines this morning, is that the city council is so far pretty resistant to just giving them money. I mean, that they do. They've got, you know, we can sometimes bang on the city of Des Moines, but they do have real challenges that they have to face and real demands on their budget. And they are unique among cities in Iowa in how they have to look. We can always find spaces that you or I might not make the same spending decisions they do. But yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of things that the city of Des Moines would rather spend money on than increasing their DART contribution.
And again, that's where you just focus on those core government services, what citizens expect, and then try to provide those services in the best fiscal, economical, you know, way possible. And giving out free bus passes and you know, for 13 riders, like, Grimes made the right decision here. And I think it's time for Des Moines to take a hard look at this before they just throw more money at a problem.
That's right. Okay,
Speaking of problems, right?
Yeah. So you've started looking at lead pipes.
Yeah.
What have you learned so far?
You know, I like looking at property taxes and lead pipes. It's just, you know, we do everything here at ITR. So I ran across this new proposed rule. So if you're following federal rulemaking,
which we all do.
Right, because that's what we all do in our spare time. Just me. There's always a proposal, and then there's this public comment period, and then the federal government comes out and imposes these rules. And just to be clear, these rules are pretty much laws. It's like lawmaking through rules and regulation, and they can be really detrimental. And this one has the potential to cost people a lot of money. So if you're listening right now, I want you to think back. Do you have a utility, which means do you pay a city for your water and sewer? And if you do, this is very important to you. Lead pipes were used in the early 1900s. Now they switched over to copper pipes, 70s, that type of thing. But the soldering and the connecting points that they used for that copper pipe still had lead in them. So lead was not eliminated from water construction until 1986. So if you have a home or a business or any type of property prior to 1986, there's a good chance you have lead pipes. And so lead causes problems. It's a neurotoxin. We all remember what happened in Flint, Michigan, and the problems with those people up there and what they had to go through. And so the federal government has said, we're going to get rid of all the lead pipes in America for health reasons. And that is admirable. Like, nobody should want lead in anybody else's water. So I totally understand where they're coming from. But you have to look at the cost of this and the real impact of this. So what they're saying is in 10 years, we're going to force all the utilities in the entirety of America to identify and replace their lead pipes. And bonus, if you are a homeowner and you have lead pipes in your home, you also be required to replace your pipes.
That's a lot of pipes.
That's a lot of pipes, but here's the thing. Are you going to tell your neighbor they have to replace their lead pipes at a possible cost of like $15,000?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to replumb your home to comply with this federal law. And who's going to enforce that? Is your local water superintendent going to walk around and hand out tickets if you don't change out your pipes? I mean,
are you able to sell your house?
Well, and that might be realistic, right? It might say, okay,
But
when
still,
it comes time to sell your house, or, it's like radon. Hey, we have to do a radon test and just see what's in there. There has to be, I think an educational component to this would work. So I sat down with my local utility superintendent and I just said, explain this to me. Tell me what you're dealing with. And he said, it's a mess. He's like, we don't have data on all these houses. He sent out mailers to the people in the community asking them what kind of pipes they have. Some people are complying, some people aren't. He said, the federal government wants me to, dig up everybody's front yard and see what connector pipes they have. They want me to go look under everyone's kitchen sink and see what kind of pipes they have. He goes, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. He said some communities have decided to replace everybody's water meter because that's a way for them to see what kind of pipes they have in the house, and that's a way that they can do the inventory. And so I don't blame my local utility superintendents across the state of Iowa because they're being forced to do this. So right now the federal government has said, let's inventory. Let's see where all the lead pipes are. That's reasonable. Now they're saying, okay, this inventory is now the roadmap for replacement. We're going to replace these all. And so again, you have an enforcement problem, and then you also have a cost problem. And I want people to understand this. So lead pipes are really found in like residential and older parts, but the ownership of those pipes is divided. So the pipe that runs under the road is owned by the utility. And in some communities, depending on how they define it, all the way to that water box that's in your front yard. Sometimes their ownership goes up to that point. But then after that, it's the homeowner's responsibility. So we're talking about a lot of concrete work and dirt work. Let's not even go into the fact that there's a shortage of plumbers right now, and the licensing requirements for plumbers is really, really strict. Do you think that there's the capacity to do all that? I mean, it just like snowballs the more and more you look at it. So
well, and and as I said at the front end, these federal requirements, like this is a straight line to the cost. It's your family budget. It is directly a federal regulation that impacts your family's budget. It's the same as a tax. That if you have to pay this. And these are the kinds of things that folks need to be aware of. And look, as you said, lead poisoning's bad. We don't want these lead pipes.
Right.
But is this the only way to mitigate the problem? Is the cost worth it? Is this the right way to go? Instead of just, someone in the federal government and the EPA said this is what we got to do, so this is what we got to do, to the tune of thousands of dollars for every Iowan. I mean, Well,
I think of my grandma. She's 88. She's healthy for an 88-year-old. Her house was built in the 1950s. Are you telling me that in her 90s, the federal government wants her to replumb her entire house?
Yes, they do.
She has no health problems associated with lead or anything. Now when she dies and we have to sell her home, if we had to do some update, I wouldn't be happy about it, but I could almost understand that more than forcing my elderly grandma to replumb her house in her 90s.
Yeah. So we're going to keep watching this one.
Yep, we are.
Good. So I guess to wrap things up, maybe it's not a wrap up, maybe it's a whole new section. We've been talking lately about last year's property tax bill that was passed, and some of the spending restrictions on local governments, and local governments have been grumbling about this. But through all of this, there's a piece that's missed, or at least we haven't been talking about as much, and is that we're now moving forward into the coming budget cycle.
Right.
To where the first time through, under the terms of last year's bill, that cities and counties will go through the budgeting process and enact their budgets. Mm-hmm. And inside of that is the first opportunity for Iowans to try and avail themselves of the tools in that property tax bill. So I'm trying to tee it up as best I can, but this is already happening, right? I mean,
it's
the
already
work has started.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It has started. Yeah. So we all got our assessments this fall. Everyone's super excited, right? Got our assessments. So now what our local governments are doing is they have that data. They have our assessments. So they're calculating out how much they can tax us, essentially. And so they're working on their budgets right now. Your cities, your counties, your school districts, they're all working on their budgets. And then come spring, you will get notification in the mail, just like those of you that had bond elections. You'll get notification that there's your budget hearing. You need to go to that meeting because that is the meeting that determines what your property tax bill is going to be.
Correct.
And the more they spend, the higher your property tax bill.
Yes.
Now, I want everyone to understand this. It's not, this is how much money we get. Let's live within our means. This is how much money do we want to spend, and then let's figure out the tax rate to give us the amount of money we want.
Correct.
That's how it works. There are a few mechanisms to limit that, but ultimately, they have their wish list, and it's up to the citizens to come in and say, not on my dime.
Yep. And it's I want to spend. We're going to talk a lot about this leading up to those budget hearings, which are February.
They're coming, so you'll have your max levy notice hearing.
Those are earlier.
And then they'll have their budget hearing. And I will tell you, I've been to some of these meetings, and they try to make it complicated because as soon as they make it complicated, people stop asking questions. And that's why you need to use ITR Local.
Yes.
ITR Local gives you, so we have our timeline on there, so you know when the budgets are starting to be worked on, which is right now. You know when the hearings are going to start happening. But you need to use that information because, they cannot argue the population in our town is down. Why are the tax revenue? Why are you collecting more money? Why are you spending more money on this? We have that kind of stuff on ITR Local.
And I think, too, and we will talk a lot more about what's the best way to engage in this process. Yeah. And obviously, arming yourself with information is always powerful. But you and I follow this stuff professionally. You much more so than I do, but you know this stuff. And if you walked in, your local city administrator, county administrator knows that budget way better than you do.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, even you who is trained up on this is still at an information disadvantage with that administrator, right? I mean, it's just by nature.
Well, because I live and breathe it from a statewide perspective in general. They live and breathe it at the local level.
But my point is, I do not expect that any individual Iowan who's frustrated with their property tax burden can arm themselves with all of the budget details and go in and argue the budget and all of the financial drivers to it with that administrator. It is an impossible task. No. And to your point, they will come in and I don't even necessarily even blame the administrators. It's their job to know these things. But it will be complicated because city and county budgets are complicated. And it will become very difficult. And so the point that I want to make is what the most important thing is that you walk in there not as an expert on that budget, but as a citizen who is tired of paying this much. And it is always appropriate to go in to your elected official or the city administrator, the county administrator, and say, I'm paying too much. I'm tapped out. I'm spending over.
That's all you have to say.
Yeah, I'm spending 1.5% of the value of my home every year as a lease payment to you for the privilege of living in my own home. And I'm tapped out, and I don't want you to raise my property taxes anymore. And communicate that you understand that it's not about millage rates and it's not about assessments. It is about how much they spend.
Yep.
And if they need it for an essential purpose, then they can make the case for it, and then you guys can have that conversation. but it is always appropriate to say, I don't want to pay anymore.
Yeah, and I was talking with city administrator, and he said, oh, I go around to all my staff and I ask them what they need and how everything's going. And I thought, that's really great. Have you asked the taxpayer how things are going?
Yes.
And he looked at me kind of strange. And I was like, but you work for the taxpayer. Like, I admire you for going around to your staff to make sure everyone feels validated and it's a good work environment. Like, that's good. That is.
Yep.
But what about the people paying your salary? What about the taxpayers that live in your community? Are they happy with the potholes? Yeah. Are they happy with whatever you have in your city? If citizens are coming in and they're demanding that they want something and they're okay paying more taxes for it, so be it. Yeah. I don't know many communities in Iowa that are doing that right now.
It's why we are doing all of this. It's why we are doing ITR Local. Is ITR has been the voice of the taxpayer, and that has predominantly been at the State House. Well, we're extending that to the local level because in far too many cases, that individual taxpayer doesn't have anyone to help empower them, to help be their voice. We cannot go to every city council meeting. We cannot go to every, but we want to help individual Iowans and give them the tools so that they can go do it themselves.
And I want to reinforce how important this budget cycle is. We just had we just had school elections. We just had city elections. You've got new city council members. You've got new school board members. They don't know what they're doing. They just ran a campaign. They need to hear from you. And if you don't go to those meetings, they're just going to do what the administrators tell them to do.
I want to, okay, and I'm reminded of this too, because there are a lot of good local elected officials out there that are trying to do this the right way. There was a terrific article in the Marshalltown paper from Jared Heil, who's, I believe, the chair of the Board of Supervisors, I think. I can't remember his title, but it was just terrific, laid out why they're doing what they're doing and how they look at this. Great job. And so sometimes what I hear is that those folks that are trying to do it the right way, they need the reinforcement. They need the encouragement to keep going, because much like it is sometimes difficult to go to a city administrator and say, and have that conversation about, well, I don't want to pay anymore. It can be sometimes just as daunting for a newly elected city councilman that's got elected to try and make a difference. But again, they don't have the information, and that's the person they have to lean on professionally as well. So sometimes it's not necessarily to go in and say, you guys are terrible, you're not doing this the right way. It's to go in and say, I appreciate you trying to stand up for me, and I'm right behind you.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I feel like we tend to point the finger. I mean, because it's so easy, because there's so many bad decisions being made. But there are those good actors that mean well, that are trying to do the right thing. And if taxpayers come in and be like, well, ask the question, why can't we lower it? Why do you have to spend that much?
It is easy for that really well-intentioned locally elected official to feel like they're on an island.
Yeah.
That they're all out there on their own. They don't have the resources. They don't have the supports, and they're trying their best to make a difference. So we need to rally around those folks too.
So, yeah, I think it's really important. We're going to talk about it coming up. But and I want to just let everyone know, Dan has been working tirelessly at ITR Local, and he has added about 80 more cities in there. So our goal is to have every city with 1,000 people or more in our database. And it is not an easy task, guys.
No, it is sort of the mythical back office that gets this stuff done. That we don't really feature enough. But there's a lot of work that goes into this, and the new ITR Local we've had out was tremendously useful during those last local elections. We got a ton of good feedback off of it, and we just want to make sure that it gets in front of as many people as can, so that they can use it.
And that's why we're doing it. We had a lot of people from 2,000 person towns, 1,500 people towns that wanted to know about their community, and so we just decided to put in the man hours and get it done.
No, it's great. Well, good. I was worried that we didn't have enough to talk about, and we had plenty to talk about, so it's great. So good. Well, I appreciate it. There's going to be a lot more to come, and we're going to need to lean on you a lot, Sarah, as we move squarely into budget season on what's going on, what to look for, and how to navigate it.
I'm here to look at spreadsheets.
Awesome.
I'm here.
All right. Well, good. Thanks for joining us. It's another episode of ITR Live. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.